I still remember the exact words my mother said when I called her from that payphone. Bleeding and broken on a sidewalk 3,000 miles away. Don't come back until you can pay us what you owe. The line went dead. I stared at the receiver in my trembling hand, watching my own blood drip onto the cracked pavement, and something inside me finally shattered. Not my spirit, my illusions. But before I tell you how I made them pay, before I show you what happens when you push someone too far, I need you to understand something. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, if you've ever been treated like a burden instead of a blessing, then this story is for you. Hit that like button, subscribe, and drop a comment telling me if you've ever had to walk away from family. Because what I'm about to tell you isn't just my story. It might be yours too. Let me take you back to the beginning. Back to when I still believed that love could be earned if I just tried hard enough. I was 18 when the accident happened, but I'd been dying slowly for years before that. My name is Harper Hayes, and I was born into a family that never wanted me. That's not self-pity talking. That's just fact. My parents, Robert and Eleanor Hayes, already had their perfect child. My older sister Briar, who was everything I wasn't. Beautiful, confident, cruel. Growing up in that house felt like living in a museum where I was the only thing not worth preserving. Every morning, I'd wake up in my small room at the end of the hallway, the one with the broken heating vent and the window that wouldn't close all the way. I could hear my family laughing at breakfast, the sound traveling down the hall like a reminder that I wasn't invited to the warmth. By the time I'd make it to the kitchen, the good food would be gone. Briar would be finishing the last of the bacon, and my mother would gesture vaguely toward a box of store-brand cereal. "You're late again," she'd say, not looking up from her phone. "Don't expect us to wait for you." My father barely acknowledged my existence unless it was to criticize. Robert Hayes was a mid-level manager at a pharmaceutical company, the kind of man who wore his mediocrity like a badge of honor and took out his frustrations on whoever couldn't fight back. That person was usually me. "Your sister made honor roll again," he'd announce at dinner, his chest puffed with pride. Then his eyes would slide to me with something close to disgust. "And you still pulling those pathetic grades. We didn't raise you to be lazy." Harper. Never mind that I was working 20 hours a week at a gas station to pay for my own school supplies because they'd decided that Briar needed a new laptop more than I needed notebooks. Never mind that I'd stay up until 2 in the morning studying after my shifts, my eyes burning with exhaustion. Nothing I did was ever enough. The day of the accident started like any other day, which is to say it started badly. I'd just finished my shift at the gas station, my feet aching in my worn-out sneakers. I'd asked my parents weeks ago if they could help me get new ones since mine had holes in the soles. And my father had laughed. Actually laughed. "You want us to spend money on shoes, what's next? A car, figure it out yourself. You're 18 now. Time to stop being a burden." A burden. That word followed me everywhere, whispered in the spaces between their sentences, implied in every eye, roll, and heavy sigh. I was walking home from the bus stop, my backpack heavy with textbooks I'd bought used online because asking my parents for help meant enduring another lecture about how much I'd already cost them just by existing. The afternoon sun was warm on my face, and for just a moment, I let myself imagine a different life. One where I came home to parents who asked about my day. One where I had a sister who was actually a sister and not a competitor I'd already lost to before the race began. I never saw the car coming. One moment I was stepping off the curb, and the next, there was a screech of tires. A sickening impact. And then I was airborne. The world spun in a blur of sky and concrete and screaming. My body hit the pavement with a crack that I felt more than heard. And then there was nothing but white-hot pain radiating from everywhere at once. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't think beyond the agony that consumed every nerve ending. There were voices above me, panicked and distant. Someone was crying. The driver, I realized dimly. A young man who kept saying, "Oh God, oh God." I didn't see her. I didn't see her. Through the haze of pain, I heard someone calling for an ambulance. My phone had flown from my pocket in the impact, and a kind stranger had picked it up, was trying to unlock it to call my emergency contacts. I managed to gasp out the passcode, and she dialed my father's number. I'll never forget what happened next. Robert Hayes arrived before the ambulance did. I heard his car before I saw him. That distinctive rattle of his aging Honda that he was too cheap to fix properly. I was lying on the ground, a stranger's jacket under my head, another person holding my hand and telling me to stay awake. I remember feeling a flutter of relief. My father was here. He'd take care of me. For once, I'd need help so badly that he'd have to step up. But when he pushed through the crowd and looked down at me, his expression wasn't concern. It was irritation. "What the hell did you do now?" "Harper." Those were his first words to me. Not "Are you okay?" Not "I'm here." Just accusation. The driver was beside himself, apologizing, saying he'd pay for everything, that his insurance would cover it. My father's eyes lit up, but not with relief. With calculation. "Take her to County General," he told the driver, naming the cheapest public hospital in the city. No point wasting money on one of those fancy emergency rooms. The stranger holding my hand looked shocked. "Sir, she needs immediate medical attention. The closest hospital is Mercy Medical. It's only 2 miles. County General," my father repeated firmly. "It's free. Or close enough." My mother arrived just as the ambulance pulled up. Eleanor Hayes stepped out of her car wearing her tennis whites. Fresh from her weekly game at the club, they somehow had money for despite claiming poverty whenever I needed anything. She took one look at me lying broken on the ground and sighed like I'd inconvenienced her. "Of course you'd find a way to make a scene." "Harper," she said, pulling out her phone to text someone. I later learned she was telling Breyer to go ahead and eat dinner without us. Can't even walk down a street properly. The paramedics tried to take over, but my father stopped them. "Is this absolutely necessary?" he asked. "Can't she just rest at home? These ambulance rides cost a fortune." "Sir, she may have internal injuries and definitely has broken bones. She needs to go to a hospital now." My father's mouth pressed into a thin line. "Fine, but the county hospital. And nothing extra. No private rooms, no unnecessary tests." As they loaded me onto the gurney, my mother leaned close. I thought maybe, finally, she'd say something kind. Something maternal. "Try not to die," she whispered. "We just paid off the car, and we can't afford a funeral right now." Then she was gone, following my father back to his car. They didn't ride in the ambulance with me. They didn't follow it to the hospital. They went home. The driver, a kid barely older than me named Tommy, did follow. He was the one who held my hand in the emergency room. He was the one who stayed when my parents didn't. County General Hospital was exactly as awful as you'd imagine. The walls were a sickly yellow. The fluorescent lights flickered. And there was a smell of disinfectant failing to cover something worse underneath. I was conscious enough by then to see it all. To register the overcrowded waiting room. The exhausted staff. The sense of barely controlled chaos. I spent 2 days in a bed with rails that didn't lock properly, drifting in and out of consciousness. When I finally woke up fully, a young doctor with kind eyes and dark circles of exhaustion was standing by my bed. "Hi, Harper. I'm Dr. Anya Sharma," she said softly. "You've been through quite an ordeal. You have a fractured tibia, 3 broken ribs, and significant bruising to your back and spine. You're lucky to be alive." Lucky. The word felt absurd. "My parents," I managed to croak. "Are they here?" Something flickered across Dr. Sharma's face. "Pity. Maybe. They were here on the first day. Your father signed some paperwork and left specific instructions about your care. Cost-effective measures only. Cost-effective. Even half delirious with pain." I understood what that meant. "They haven't been back?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Doctor." Sharma shook her head. "I'm sorry. The nurses tried calling the contact numbers, but no one answered." I turned my face to the wall so she wouldn't see me cry. But I wasn't crying from pain. I was crying because I'd finally understood that the love I'd spent 18 years chasing didn't exist and never had. Later that day, a nurse brought me a trash bag. "This is what you came in with," she said apologetically. Inside were my ruined clothes, my broken phone, and a note. I recognized my mother's handwriting immediately. The note was short. "Don't come back to the house until you pay us back for the medical bills. We can't afford to support you anymore." This is your mess. Clean it up. There was no "we hope you feel better." No, we were so worried. Just an invoice for my existence. I stayed in that hospital for 5 days total. Doctor Sharma bent a lot of rules to keep me there that long. Sneaking me extra meals. Making sure my pain medication was adequate, despite my father's instructions for minimal intervention. On the day I was discharged, she pulled me aside. "Harper, I'm worried about you. Do you have somewhere safe to go?" The question hung in the sterile hospital air between us. Doctor Sharma's dark eyes searched my face. Looking for truth I wasn't ready to give her. I opened my mouth and lied as smoothly as I'd learned to lie about everything else in my life. "Yes," I said. "I have a place." The truth was so much uglier than that simple lie. I had nothing. No place. No plan. No safety net. The tiny apartment I'd been crashing in with 2 other students had been a temporary arrangement that ended 2 weeks before the accident. When I couldn't make rent because I'd chosen textbooks over shelter, I'd been sleeping on my parents' couch since then. Each night, accompanied by pointed remarks about how long I planned to abuse their hospitality, how much space I took up, how the couch was starting to sag from my weight. Doctor Sharma's face told me she didn't believe me. The lines around her eyes deepened with concern, and she bit her lower lip like she was physically holding back the words she wanted to say. We both knew she couldn't force me to accept help. Healthcare had rules, boundaries, limits. She'd already bent several of them to keep me in that bed for 5 days, instead of the 2 my father had authorized. She reached into her white coat and pulled out a business card, pressing it into my palm and closing my fingers around it. Her hands were warm, and mine were so cold I could barely feel them. "If you need anything," she said, her voice dropping to almost a whisper, "anything at all. Harper, promise me, you'll call me. It doesn't matter what time, what day. If you need help, you call?" I nodded, but we both knew I wouldn't. Pride wouldn't let me. Shame wouldn't let me. And somewhere deeper, in a place I didn't want to examine too closely, was the bone-deep knowledge that I needed to figure this out on my own. Because hoping for rescue, waiting for someone to save me, had only ever led to disappointment. The hospital discharged me with crutches that rubbed blisters under my arms within the first 10 minutes. A prescription for pain medication. I had exactly $0 to fill, and a plastic bag containing my ruined clothes. I changed in the bathroom. My reflection in the spotted mirror, showing a stranger with hollow eyes and a face that looked 10 years older than 18. The journey home took 2 hours. Hobbling to the bus stop, waiting in the cold. 3 different buses because I couldn't afford the direct route. Each bump and turn sent lightning bolts of pain up my healing leg. Other passengers stared at my crutches, my bruise, my obvious struggle, and then quickly looked away. It's easier to ignore suffering when you don't make eye contact. By the time I reached my parents' neighborhood, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that seemed obscenely beautiful for such an ugly day. Their house stood exactly as I'd left it, the lawn perfectly manicured, the flower beds Eleanor tended with more care than she'd ever shown me, the American flag hanging limp from its pole, picture perfect. Through the windows, I could see movement, the flicker of the television, shadows passing through the dining room, the warm glow of the chandelier my mother had spent 3 months selecting. A normal family, having a normal evening. Dinner was probably already finished, dishes stacked in the sink for me to wash later. If there was a later, I reached into my pocket for my house key, the one I'd carried since I was 12, and finally deemed responsible enough not to lose it. My hands shook as I slid it into the lock, imagining the door opening, imaging my mother's face softening when she saw how badly I was hurt, imagining my father actually looking me in the eye for once. The key didn't turn. I jiggled it, thinking maybe the lock was stiff. Nothing. I pulled it out and examined it, wondering if somehow I'd grabbed the wrong key. Even though I knew every groove and ridge of this piece of metal, they'd changed the locks while I was lying in a hospital bed. While I was unconscious and vulnerable, they'd changed the locks. The realization hit harder than the car had. I knocked 3 times, polite and tentative, then louder when no one came. Then I was pounding on the door with the side of my fist, each impact sending shock waves up my injured ribs. But I couldn't stop. The physical pain was easier to bear than what was happening in my chest. "I know you're in there," my voice cracked. "Please, it's me, it's Harper." The porch light flicked on, harsh and sudden, making me squint. I heard the chain lock slide into place with a metallic scrape that sounded like a prison door closing. Then the door opened, but only 3 inches, and my mother's face appeared in the gap. She looked perfect, hair freshly styled, makeup applied with precision, wearing the cashmere sweater my father had bought her for Christmas. She looked at me the way you'd look at a door-to-door salesman. Inconvenienced, vaguely annoyed, completely unmoved. "Oh," she said, her voice as flat as a dial tone. "You're still alive. Honestly, the hospital must not have been as cheap as your father hoped. Or they'd have let nature take its course." The casual cruelty of it stole my breath. "Mom, please. I need to come inside. I need to rest. I'm hurt. I can barely stand. I just need—" "What you need," she cut me off, her voice sharpening, "is to learn to take care of yourself for once in your life. We got the hospital bills yesterday. Harper, do you have any idea, any clue whatsoever how much this little stunt of yours is going to cost us?" "Stunt." The word came out as a whisper. "I was hit by a car. Thousands of dollars," she continued, as if I hadn't spoken. "Thousands. Because you couldn't be bothered to look both ways before crossing the street like a normal person, and now we're supposed to just absorb that cost, while you waltz back here expecting what sympathy a parade." The injustice of it ignited something in my chest. It wasn't my fault. I was in the crosswalk. The driver ran a red light. There were witnesses. It's always someone else's fault with you, isn't it? My father's voice boomed from somewhere behind her. And then he was there, shouldering my mother aside to fill the doorway. His face was flushed, probably from the scotch I could smell on his breath. His arms were crossed over his chest like a bouncer blocking entry to a club. Never your responsibility. Never your problem. Always the victim. That's our Harper. For one insane moment, looking at his face, I thought I saw something flicker there. Recognition. Maybe. Of how badly I was hurt. How much I needed them. But then his expression hardened into something familiar. Contempt. Irritation. The look he'd given me my entire life when I'd needed anything from him. "Dad." My voice broke on the word. "Please. I have nowhere else to go. I'm begging you. Just let me in. Just for tonight. I promise I'll figure something out tomorrow. But right now I can't." "Should have thought of that before you decided to rack up a medical bill we can't afford," he said. Then his mouth curved into something that might have been a smile on someone else's face, but on his looked like cruelty given shape. "We cleaned out your room while you were gone. Had to. Sold your desk to the neighbors for $200. That dresser Grandma left you went to a consignment shop. Got decent money for it. Actually, consider it back payment for the 18 years we've supported you." The world tilted. My crutches slipped on the porch, and I barely caught myself. "You sold my furniture, my grandmother's dresser, the one she gave me before she died. It was our furniture. In our house," my mother said, her tone suggesting she was explaining something to a particularly slow child. Past tense. "We've been hemorrhaging money for years because of you. Harper. Your food, your clothes, your school supplies. Did you think all of that was free? It's time you learned that actions have consequences. That life isn't just handed to you on a silver platter." Behind them, Briar's face appeared, floating like a ghost over their shoulders, illuminated by the glow of her phone screen. She wasn't even trying to hide her smile. That smile I knew so well. The one she wore when she got away, with blaming me for something she'd done. The smile of someone watching a show they particularly enjoyed. "Oh my God. You actually came back." She let out a laugh that sounded like breaking glass. "This is priceless. I literally just texted my friends that you'd probably end up homeless. I'm sending them a picture. They're not going to believe this." She raised her phone, and I heard the camera shutter sound effect. She was taking a photo of me. Of this moment. Of my humiliation. For entertainment. Something inside me that had been fracturing for years, developing hairline cracks with every dismissal. Every cruel word. Every moment of feeling invisible in my own family. Finally shattered. But it didn't shatter into despair or sadness or even anger. It shattered into something crystal clear and razor sharp. Clarity. I could see them now. Really see them. Maybe for the first time in my life. These people weren't going to change. They weren't going to have a moment of realization and apologize. They weren't going to magically become the family I'd needed. This was it. This was who they were. This was who they'd always been. I see, I said quietly. My voice had changed. It was calmer than it had been in years. I understand now. My father nodded, satisfied. Like I'd finally learned an important lesson. Good. Glad that's settled. Now, we'll be forwarding you the hospital bills. There's a payment plan option. Apparently, you'll need to call them and set that up. And Harper, he leaned forward slightly, and I could see the satisfaction in his eyes. Don't contact us until you've paid every single cent. That's thousands of dollars. So I wouldn't expect to hear from you for a very, very long time. Maybe never. The door started to close. Without thinking, my hand shot out, catching it, stopping it for just a moment. Pain screamed up my arm from the impact, but I barely felt it. Wait. The word came out steady. Too steady, the kind of steady that comes right before a storm. I just want to say one thing. Just one thing. And then I'll go. They paused. My mother's face pinched with impatience, checking her watch like I was making her late for something important. My father's jaw clenched with annoyance, probably calculating how much time I was wasting that he could be spending in front of the TV. Briar's smirk widened, eager for one more moment of entertainment. I will never forget this, I said, speaking slowly so every word landed with weight. Not the accident. Not the hospital. Not the way you told them not to waste money on me when I was bleeding on the street. Not the note you left telling me not to come back. Not this door. Not the locks you changed. Not a single second of any of this. And one day, I swear to you, you are going to wish you had been kinder. For a heartbeat, something flickered across my father's face. Not regret. Maybe recognition of a threat. But then he laughed. Actually threw his head back and laughed like I'd told the funniest joke he'd heard in years. Is that a threat? His voice dripped with mockery. Really? From someone who can't even stand up straight without crutches? From our daughter who's never succeeded at a single thing in her entire pathetic life? Go ahead. Harper. Try. Try whatever you think you're going to do. You're nothing. You've always been nothing. Why would anything change now? The door closed. The lock clicked. The porch light went off, plunging me into darkness. And I was alone on the porch of the house where I'd grown up. In front of the door I'd walked through thousands of times. In the presence of the family I'd never actually belonged to, I stood there for a long moment, swaying slightly on my crutches, my body screaming for rest, my mind eerily quiet. I waited for the tears to come, for the breakdown I'd earned, for the collapse that seemed inevitable, but nothing came. No tears. No screams. No despair. I'd cried all my tears already, spilled them on hospital floors and into thin pillows, and alone in the dark. I was done crying. Crying required hope that things could be different, and hope had just died on this porch. Instead, I felt something else rising up from the ruins of that shattered illusion, something cold and hard and purposeful. Determination. Resolution. The kind of clarity that only comes when you finally stop lying to yourself about what you're dealing with. I turned around, adjusted my crutches, and started walking. Each step was agony, but I barely felt it. My body was in pain, but my mind was crystallizing around a single thought, a promise I was making to myself with each painful step away from that house. They thought I was nothing. They'd made a bet on my failure. Fine. Let them believe that. Let them think they'd won, that they'd finally gotten rid of the burden they'd never wanted. I'd prove them wrong. Not for them, not for approval or love or acceptance, I now understood would never come. For me, to show myself that I was more than their worst expectations, that their version of me had nothing to do with who I actually was. The door stayed closed behind me. No one called me back. No last-minute change of heart. The house stood there, windows glowing with warmth I'd never been invited to feel, and I walked away from it without looking back. I was 18 years old, injured, homeless, and completely alone. And somehow, despite everything, I'd never felt more free. I made it to the park 3 blocks away before I couldn't walk anymore. My leg was screaming. My ribs felt like they were filled with glass. And exhaustion hit me like a second car. There was a bench near the playground, hidden partially by trees. I collapsed onto it and stared up at the stars. A stray dog limped over, 3-legged and scarred. It curled up under the bench, and I felt a kinship with it. We were both broken things the world had discarded. We're the same. You and me. I whispered to the dog. Trash that nobody wanted. I spent that night on the bench, shivering despite my jacket, watching the windows of my parents' house in the distance. The lights stayed on late. I imagined them inside, probably celebrating their successful purging of the family burden. Briar was probably in my old room, spreading out, claiming the extra space. By morning, I'd made a decision. I wasn't going to beg anymore. I wasn't going to hope they'd change. I was going to survive. And then, when I was strong enough, I was going to make sure they understood exactly what they'd done. The first week was the hardest. I spent my days hobbling around the city on my crutches, looking for work that would take someone who could barely stand. Most places took one look at my injuries and my lack of an address and sent me away. I learned to lie. I learned to smile through pain. I learned that rock bottom has a basement. I was sitting outside a convenience store, trying to figure out where I'd sleep that night, when an older man came out carrying 2 bags of groceries. He looked at me for a long moment, taking in my crutches, my dirty clothes, the desperation I couldn't quite hide. "You need a job?" he asked gruffly. I scrambled to my feet too quickly, nearly falling. Yes. Yes. Sire? I'll do anything." He studied me. "I'm Marcus Thorne. I own this place. I need someone to mop floors, take out trash, basic cleaning. It's not glamorous, and it doesn't pay much, but you can start today if you want." I said quickly. "Thank you. Thank you so much." Marcus nodded. "Don't thank me yet. I work my people hard, but I'm fair, and I pay on time. Can you handle that?" I could have cried with relief. Instead, I just nodded. That's how I started rebuilding my life. One dirty floor at a time. Marcus was a man of few words, but he was true to his. He didn't ask questions about my situation, didn't pry into my past. He just gave me work and let me prove myself. When I couldn't afford to fill my pain medication prescription, he wordlessly handed me a bottle of ibuprofen and told me to take it easy on my leg. After 2 weeks, he mentioned that the small room above the store was vacant. "It's not much. Just a bathroom and a space big enough for a mattress. But if you want it, you can have it for cheap rent. I'll take it out of your paycheck." I moved in that day. It was tiny, barely bigger than a closet, and the mattress was thin and lumpy. But it was mine. No one could take it from me. No one could lock me out. I cried that first night in my new place. Not from sadness, but from the overwhelming relief of having a door I could close. Slowly, painfully, I started to rebuild. I worked at the store during the day, and at night, I studied. Not for school anymore. That dream was dead. But I studied other things. I taught myself about finances, about credit, about debt collection and property law. I spent hours at the public library, reading everything I could about how money worked, how people lost everything, how systems could be manipulated. I was planning. I didn't know exactly what for yet. But I knew I needed to understand the world that my parents lived in. The world of mortgages and bills and credit scores. The world where they'd decided I wasn't worth saving. 3 months after the accident, I saw my father for the first time. I was working the late shift, mopping the floors near the front of the store. When he walked in, he didn't recognize me at first. Why would he? He'd never really looked at me before. He walked right past me to the wine section, muttering to himself about prices. I should have stayed quiet. Should have let him leave without knowing I was there. But something in me, some hard kernel of anger that I'd been nurturing in the dark, pushed me to speak. "Hello, Dad." He turned, confused at first. And then recognition dawned. His face went through several expressions: surprise, embarrassment, and then, settling on contempt. Harper. He said my name like a curse. So this is where you ended up. Mopping floors. Honest work, I said evenly, not stopping my mopping. He laughed. That same cruel laugh I'd heard my entire life. Honest work. Right. Have you started paying back those hospital bills yet, or are you still playing the victim? I straightened up, leaning on my mop. My leg had healed enough that I didn't need crutches anymore, though I still limped when I was tired. The bills you never paid, the ones the hospital wrote off as charity care when they realized I was homeless. His face darkened. You were never homeless. You had a home. You chose to leave. You changed the locks. Because you needed to learn responsibility. His voice was rising now. And other customers were starting to stare. Do you know what you cost us? Harper, do you have any idea that hospital tried to bill us $23,000? $23,000. For your stupidity. For saving my life. You weren't dying. Stop being dramatic. You had some broken bones. People deal with that all the time without bankrupting their families. I felt Marcus approaching from the back office, but I held up a hand, stopping him. This was my fight. You told the driver to take me to the cheapest hospital. I said quietly. You told them not to waste money on me. Mom told me not to die because you just paid off your car. Oh, so now you're going to throw our words back at us, taken out of context. I'm sure. We were stressed. Harper. We'd just found out our daughter had been hit by a car. Forgive us for not being perfect in that moment. The gaslighting was so smooth, so practiced, that I almost doubted myself. Almost. But I'd had 3 months of silence and healing to think about everything they'd ever said and done. I wasn't confused anymore. You're right, I said, picking up my mop again. You weren't perfect. But you also weren't parents. His face went red. How dare you? We fed you, clothed you, put a roof over your head for 18 years. The bare minimum required by law. Congratulations. You ungrateful little. He stopped himself, glancing around at the staring customers. When he spoke again, his voice was lower but no less venomous. You're just like I always knew you'd be. A failure. A waste. We should have stopped after Briar. She was enough. You were just a mistake we couldn't fix. The words should have hurt. A month ago, they would have destroyed me. But now, they just felt like confirmation of something I'd always known. Is there anything else? I asked. Or are you done? He slammed his wine bottle on the counter and stormed out without buying it. Marcus appeared beside me. You okay? Kid. I nodded, surprised to find that I was Yeah, I'm okay. That's your father? He asked, even though he clearly already knew. Used to be. Marcus was quiet for a moment, then clapped me on the shoulder. Family's not always blood. Harper, remember that. After that night, I stopped imagining reconciliation. I stopped hoping they'd realize their mistake and come looking for me. Instead, I focused on learning everything I could about their world. I created a fake social media account and followed Briar. She posted constantly pictures of their house, their cars, their shopping trips, my mother's tennis club selfies, my father's photos from his company golf outings. They were living the same life they'd always lived, as if I'd never existed at all. But I learned things from those posts. I learned that my father had changed jobs and was now at a smaller company. I learned that they'd refinanced their house. I learned that Briar had gotten into an expensive private college, and my parents were bragging about paying her full tuition. They had money. Not for me, but for everything else. The realization didn't hurt anymore. It just fueled my determination. I started asking questions at the store. Marcus knew everyone in the neighborhood. And through careful, casual conversations, I learned things. I learned that my parents had taken out a second mortgage on the house. I learned that my father's company had been downsizing. I learned that my mother's spending habits hadn't changed, even as their income apparently had. I wasn't doing anything with this information yet. I was just collecting it, storing it away like ammunition for a war I wasn't sure I'd fight. 6 months after the accident, I got promoted. Marcus made me assistant manager, which came with a raise and more responsibilities. I was good at the job. Better than good. I understood the business, understood the customers, understood how to maximize profit in a tight market. Marcus started asking for my input on everything. "You're smart, kid," he told me one day. "Too smart to be stuck here forever. You should go to college." I shook my head. "Can't afford it." "Community college," he insisted. "Night classes. I'll work around your schedule." So I did. I enrolled in basic business courses, then accounting, then finance. I paid for each class out of my paycheck, and I worked harder than I'd ever worked in my life. My grades were perfect. They had to be. I was done being the failure my family had always said I was. It was during my second semester of community college, in a personal finance class, that I learned about debt collection and how third parties could buy debt. I learned about property liens and how unpaid bills could accumulate interest. I learned about the legal ways to make someone's financial life miserable, and I started to form a plan. It took another year of patient work, a year of saving every penny I could, of taking extra shifts, of building my credit from nothing. I lived off ramen and rice, wore clothes from thrift stores, never went out, never had fun. Every dollar had a purpose. I hired a private investigator. It wasn't cheap, but it was worth it. I needed to know exactly what my parents' financial situation was. The PI came back with a report that made me smile for the first time in months. My parents were drowning in debt. The house was mortgaged to the hilt. My father's company had cut his salary. My mother had maxed out 4 credit cards. Briar's college tuition was crushing them. They'd taken out loans against their retirement accounts. They were barely holding on, and they were hiding it well. The perfect family facade was propped up by a mountain of debt and desperation. But the most interesting thing the PI found was a series of unpaid medical bills. Not mine. Ironically, my father had developed some health issues and had been avoiding treatment to save money. When he'd finally gone to the hospital, he'd provided false insurance information to avoid the out-of-pocket costs. The hospital had eventually caught on and sent the bills to collections. Those collection debts had been bundled and sold to a third-party company. And with enough money and the right connections, those debts could be bought by anyone. I used every penny of my savings, took out a small loan, and bought those debts. It took weeks of paperwork and negotiation, but eventually, I held legal ownership of my father's medical debt, over $30,000, with accumulated interest. I didn't do anything with it right away. I just held on to it, savoring the knowledge that I had power over them now, the same kind of power they'd wielded over me my entire life. 8 months after I bought the debt, my mother showed up at the store. I almost didn't recognize her. Eleanor Hayes had always been impeccably dressed, her hair salon perfect, her nails manicured. But the woman who walked into Marcus's store looked haggard. Her hair was pulled into a messy ponytail. Her face was bare of makeup, and her clothes looked slept in. "Harper," she said when she saw me. "Thank God. I wasn't sure you'd still be here." I didn't respond. I just watched her, waiting. "We need your help," she said, her voice cracking. "Your father had an accident. He crashed the car. The insurance lapsed because we couldn't afford the premium. And now we're being sued by the other driver. The medical bills are piling up, and the lawyers are threatening to put a lien on our house." I felt nothing. No sympathy. No anger. Just cold, calm curiosity. "And you came to me because your family," she said desperately. "I know things have been difficult between us. I know we haven't always been supportive. But we're family. Harper. Family helps each other." The audacity was breathtaking. I almost admired it. "When you say difficult," I said slowly, "do you mean when you told me not to come home until I paid you back, or when you changed the locks while I was in the hospital, or when Dad told the driver to take me to the cheapest hospital and told the doctors not to waste money on me? Which difficult things specifically?" My mother's face crumpled. "We were scared. We didn't mean those things. You have to understand, we were under so much pressure." "How much do you need?" I asked. Hope lit up her eyes. 30,000. Maybe 40 with legal fees. "Do you have savings?" I nodded. "I have savings." "Oh, thank God." She actually reached out to hug me, but I stepped back. "But I'm not giving you anything," I said. Her face went blank with shock. What? You told me to never come back until I paid my debts. I paid them. I paid them by surviving without you. By building a life from nothing. By learning that I'm worth more than you ever made me feel. Now you're drowning in your own debts. And you want me to save you, tell me. Mom. Why should I? Because I'm your mother, she shrieked. No, I said calmly. You're the woman who gave birth to me and then spent 18 years wishing she hadn't. There's a difference. She started crying then. A big heaving sobs that might have moved me once, but I'd cried too many tears on too many park benches to be moved by hers. Please, Harper, we'll lose everything. The house, the cars, everything. Your sister had to drop out of college because we can't pay tuition. Your father can barely work because of his injuries. We have nothing left. Then I guess you'll know what it feels like, I said. To have nothing. To be nothing. To be told you're not worth saving. She looked at me like she'd never seen me before. You've changed. No, I corrected. You broke me, and I built myself back stronger. There's a difference. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry for everything. I don't believe you, I said. But even if I did, sorry doesn't pay debts. She left without another word, her shoulders shaking with sobs. 2 days later, Robert showed up. He looked worse than my mother had. He was using a cane, had visible bruises on his face, and moved like every step hurt. Part of me, a small part that I hated, felt a flash of sympathy. I crushed it. Harper, he said, his voice gruff. Your mother said you refused to help us. That's correct. I need you to reconsider. No. His face darkened with the old familiar anger. Don't you dare take that tone with me. I'm still your father. Are you? I asked. Because fathers protect their children. They don't tell emergency personnel to use the cheapest possible care. They don't sell their daughter's furniture to pay for their own mistakes. They don't change locks while their child is homeless. We did what we had to do, he insisted. We were trying to teach you responsibility. By abandoning me when I was most vulnerable. By calling me a burden. By telling me you wished I'd died. I never said that. Mom did. And you didn't disagree. He was silent for a long moment, and I could see him struggling with whether to keep gaslighting me or try a different approach. He chose differently. Please, he said, and the word sounded foreign coming from his mouth. I'm begging you. We need $40,000. Without it, we lose the house. We lose everything. Everything, I repeated. Everything like what I had when you threw me out. A trash bag of ruined clothes and a note telling me not to come back. That was different. How? He had no answer for that. Here's what I'll do, I said. I'll give you the same choice you gave me. Figure it out yourself. Stop being a burden. Take some responsibility. Those are your words. Dad, your philosophy. Now you get to live by it. His face twisted with rage. You vindictive little. Careful. I interrupted. You're in my workplace. Act out, and I'll have you removed. He raised his cane like he might strike me, and for a moment, I saw the same man who'd made my childhood a nightmare. But I wasn't a child anymore, and I wasn't afraid. Marcus appeared from the back room. He was a big man, and he looked bigger when he was angry. There's a problem here. My father lowered his cane. No problem. I was just leaving. He limped toward the door, then turned back. You'll regret this. When we're gone, when it's too late, you'll wish you'd helped us. No, I said. I really won't. After he left, Marcus looked at me with concern. You okay? Harper. I surprised myself by laughing. You know what I really am. But I wasn't done. Not yet. 3 weeks later, I received a letter from a lawyer I'd hired. Everything was ready. I'd purchased not just my father's medical debt, but also a small outstanding tax lien on their property that had gone unnoticed in the chaos of their finances. Combined with the debt I already owned, I had legal grounds to force a judgment against them. I didn't want their money. I couldn't get blood from a stone anyway. But I wanted them to know that I could have taken everything if I'd wanted to. I wanted them to feel the fear and powerlessness I'd felt. The lawyer sent them formal notice. Within the law, I was calling in the debts. They had 30 days to pay in full or face legal action that could result in foreclosure. I knew they couldn't pay. The point wasn't the money. The point was the message. I drove by their house one evening. The first time I'd been back to that neighborhood in almost 2 years. The grass was overgrown. The paint was peeling. The mailbox hung at an angle. My father's car was gone. There was a for sale sign in the yard, but it looked like it had been there a while. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindicated. I just felt tired. My phone buzzed. It was a message from Briar. The first she'd sent me since the accident. "I hope you're happy. You destroyed our family." I typed back. I wasn't the one who did that. She didn't respond. A week before the 30-day deadline, I got a call from an unknown number. It was Dr. Anya Sharma, the doctor who'd treated me at County General. "Harper," she said, sounding pleased. "I've been thinking about you. I wanted to check in. See how you're doing?" "I'm good," I said, surprised by how true it was. "Really good. Actually, I'm glad to hear that. You know, when I treated you, I saw something in you. A strength that most people don't have. I knew you'd be okay." We talked for an hour. She told me about a program at the hospital for displaced youth, how she was working to change policies about how they treated uninsured patients. I told her about my job, my classes, my tiny apartment. "You should come speak to my students," she said. "Medical students need to understand that every patient has a story, that their actions matter." I agreed, and when I went to speak to her class, standing in front of those eager young faces, I told them my story. All of it. The accident, the abandonment, the hospital that saved me, even though I couldn't pay. I told them about Dr. Sharma and the nurses who'd bent rules to keep me safe. One student asked, "Did you ever forgive your parents?" I thought about it carefully. Forgiveness is complicated. I don't hate them anymore. I don't even think about them most days. But forgive, that implies they asked for forgiveness and changed their behavior. They didn't. So instead, I released them. I let go of the idea that they would ever be what I needed. And in doing that, I found peace. Another student asked, "What about the debt you own? Are you really going to take their house?" I smiled. "I haven't decided yet. But here's what I learned. Sometimes the best revenge isn't destruction. It's indifference. It's building a life so full and rich that they become irrelevant. That's what I'm working on." 2 days before the deadline, I called the lawyer. "Drop it," I said. "Let the debt go." "Are you sure?" he asked. "You have every legal right." "I know, but I don't want it anymore. They've lost enough. Their pride, their perfect family image, their security. That's enough. And the debt you own, forgive it. All of it. I don't want it hanging over me." I never told my parents what I did. I never explained that I could have taken everything but chose not to. They probably assumed the creditor had made a mistake or given up. They'd never know that I held their fate in my hands and then opened those hands and let them go. 3 months later, I transferred to a 4-year university on a full scholarship. My grades and my story had impressed the admissions board. I was studying business and psychology. Fascinated by the intersection of money and human behavior, Marcus threw me a going-away party at the store. Dr. Sharma came, along with some of my professors and classmates. It was small, but it was mine. These people had chosen to be there. They wanted to celebrate me. "I'm proud of you." And Marcus said, his eyes suspiciously bright, "You're going to do amazing things." "I learned from the best," I said, hugging him tight. The night before I left for college, I walked past my parents' house one last time. It was dark, and I couldn't tell if anyone still lived there or if they'd finally lost it. Either way, it didn't matter. I stood on the sidewalk where I'd been hit by that car 2 years ago. The scar on my leg still ached sometimes, especially when it rained. But I didn't regret it. That accident had destroyed my old life, but it had also freed me to build a new one. I thought about sending my parents a final message, something profound or cutting or final. But in the end, I realized the best message was silence. They were irrelevant now. They'd become what they'd always tried to make me feel invisible. I walked away from that house, from that neighborhood, from that life. I didn't look back. At university, I thrived. I made friends. Real friends who chose me for who I was. I joined clubs, studied hard, and discovered I was actually good at so many things when I wasn't being told I was worthless. I even started dating someone kind, someone who treated me with respect and genuine affection. One day in my junior year, I got an email from Briar. The subject line was, "Can we talk?" I almost deleted it, but curiosity won out. The email was long, rambling, and surprisingly honest. She apologized for how she'd treated me growing up. She explained that she'd been so focused on being the favorite that she'd become cruel without realizing it. She told me that our parents' marriage was falling apart, that they blamed each other for losing me. She said she was in therapy, working through her own issues. "I don't expect you to forgive me," she wrote. "I just wanted you to know that I see now what I couldn't see then. You were never the problem. They were. And I was. And I'm sorry." I read the email 3 times. Then I wrote back a simple response. "Thank you for saying that. I hope therapy helps. I hope you find peace." I didn't offer reconciliation. I didn't extend an olive branch. But I also didn't lash out. I was done with anger. It served its purpose, fueling me when I needed fuel. But I didn't need it anymore. Now, at 24, I'm finishing my MBA. I work part-time at a financial consulting firm, helping people navigate debt and rebuild their credit. I'm good at it. I understand the desperation, the shame, the feeling of drowning, and I help people find their way out. I've spoken at conferences about financial abuse in families. I've written articles about recognizing toxic family dynamics. I've helped dozens of young people escape situations like mine. Sometimes people ask me if I ever miss my family. The honest answer is no. I don't miss the people who made me feel worthless. But I do miss the idea of family. The dream of having parents who loved me unconditionally. I grieve for the child I was, who deserved so much better. But I don't grieve for the woman I've become. She's strong, independent, and compassionate. She survived because she had to, and she thrives because she chooses to. My parents live in a small apartment now. From what I hear through occasional social media glimpses, they're not destitute. But they're not comfortable either. They've learned to live within their means because they have no other choice. Sometimes I wonder if they think about me, if they regret their choices, if they understand what they lost. But mostly, I don't wonder. They're part of my past, and I've built a future that they have no claim to. The 3-legged dog I befriended that first night in the park, I eventually caught him and took him to a vet. After getting him healthy, I adopted him. His name is Phoenix, because we both rose from the ashes of our worst days. He sleeps at the foot of my bed in my small but comfortable apartment, and sometimes I look at him and think about how far we've both come. Dr. Sharma and I still have dinner once a month. She's become a mentor and a friend. One of the few adults in my life who saw my worth when I couldn't see it myself. Marcus sent me a card every semester with a $20 bill inside and a note saying, "For textbooks or pizza? Your choice." I've kept every single card. These people, the ones who chose to support me when they didn't have to, they're my real family. Family isn't just blood. It's the people who show up. It's the people who see you at your worst and decide you're worth fighting for. My biological family made me feel like a burden. Like my existence was a debt I could never repay. But I learned that the opposite was true. They were the burden. They were the debt weighing me down. And when I cut them loose, I became weightless. I stand on the balcony of my apartment sometimes, looking out at the city lights, and I feel something I never felt in that big house, with the perfect lawn and the locked doors peace. I built this life brick by brick, dollar by dollar, choice by choice. No one can take it from me because no one gave it to me. That's what they never understood. You can't lose what you earned yourself. You can't be broken when you've already been shattered and put yourself back together with your own hands. I don't know if this is a happy ending. I don't know if someone like me gets those. But it's a good ending. It's an honest ending. And it's mine. Sometimes the best revenge isn't hurting the people who hurt you. It's becoming so whole, so complete, so undeniably yourself that their opinion becomes irrelevant. It's building a life so beautiful that you forget they exist. That's what I did. And that's why I won. Here's what I want you to understand if you're living through something similar. If you're the family scapegoat, the forgotten child, the one who's never quite good enough. Listen to me. It's not you. It's never been you. Their inability to love you is their failure, not yours. And when you finally have the courage to walk away, to stop setting yourself on fire to keep them warm, you'll discover something incredible. You were never the burden. You were never the problem. You were always enough. They just weren't capable of seeing it. Walk away. Build your life. Become the person they said you'd never be. And then, if you're lucky, you'll reach a point where you don't even care if they notice, because you'll be too busy living a life they can't touch. That's not bitterness. That's freedom. And freedom, I've learned, is the sweetest revenge of all. Now let me ask you something. Have you ever had to walk away from family? Have you ever been made to feel like a burden by the people who were supposed to love you unconditionally? Drop a comment below and tell me your story. You're not alone in this. None of us are. And if this story resonated with you, if you see yourself in my journey, hit that like button and subscribe, because every person who hears this story and recognizes their own worth is another victory against the people who tried to make us feel worthless. Let's build a community of survivors, of fighters, of people who refuse to stay broken. Your story matters. Your survival matters. You matter. Don't ever let anyone tell you different.